Hello ratbags, it's Jade. Welcome to a Conan Exiles update video. God damn, it's been a hot minute since I've done one of these. In fact, I really pretty much ignored Conan Exiles for the last 6 months. Really haven't touched it since SIPTAH came out on PC, and that was 8 months ago. And that is approximately the last time consoles had a decent actual content update. It hasn't been excusable. I have been pretty pissed off with Funcom, and I decided that I wasn't really going to get behind anything they did until console actually got a patch for Xbox and PlayStation. But now it's here, it's just gone live today on Xbox. It's got literally hundreds of improvements, hundreds of fixes, lots of content over them 8 months that PC have been receiving, and it's finally making its way to console at last. I really can't sit here and go through every single fix and add-on. It will take me ages, and I don't know if this is even me saying that I'm going to be covering Conan in the future. I still think they've got some ground to make up, and I'm interested to see exactly how the SIPTAH DLC will launch on consoles before I decide to go and support a game that I thought was doing really well at one point. So we're going to cover some of that. I'm going to talk about what the basics of this is, just in case you haven't dived into Conan just like me and you're curious. And yeah, what happens next? Is this the start of Funcom actually getting their house in order? Don't forget to like, make sure you subscribe for the best in survival games news with opinion. Let's go. So the Ida SIPTAH came out in September back in 2020, and amongst the update that added the brand new landmass, the paid DLC content, there were some actual big changes and fixes that went alongside that. Now at that time, Xbox and PlayStation did receive a little fix, but it wasn't really a lot of the same stuff that was going into the PC. We were told that because of the way it was being delivered, because it affected so much with the SIPTAH DLC, that it would take some time for it to hit consoles. It was a big disappointment that SIPTAH wasn't going to launch on Xbox and PlayStation at the same time. I was pretty disappointed. I had early access to the DLC, and at no point did anyone let me know that consoles would be so far behind. You guys know I'm always representing. I may have a free 90 graphics card, I can easily go and play on PC, and I do, but I still just prefer making sure that I'm always giving you guys the info and really fighting your corner on the console. So I wasn't happy, and I decided from that point I wasn't really going to cover Conan Exiles until I started seeing improvements, until we started seeing exactly how much the DLC would cost on Xbox and PlayStation. So since then I've had 3 major updates, with a 4th going live today on PC, and they contain so many changes, so many differences, adding more crafting options to the game. Obviously lots of hot fixes as well. And just an FYI, this isn't just updates for people that bought the DLC, this is stuff that's going into the base game. You don't need to own the DLC to receive this content even on PC, but there were some significant updates that also went into the SIPTAH experience. So the best way you're going to catch up on exactly what's been added over that period, maybe you're a console fan, you really haven't been, is to go and check out WAC4863 and Kaya on Fire. These 2 creators pretty much live and breathe Conan Exiles and have been carrying on supporting the game all throughout that time. They'll give you the lowdown of everything you'd come to expect with Conan over them few months with much better detail than I will. I'm not going to pretend that I can know all the changes or really what it means to the game, because I just haven't played Conan regularly for a long time. Particularly WAC, I know, has done a few videos focused on consoles and what to expect, so absolutely make sure you go and check out that video too. You'll find links for their channels in the comment section. The update today doesn't obviously introduce the DLC for SIPTAH yet. I'm expecting an announcement about that in the next couple of weeks. But the promise was that once they got the consoles up to date, they would then start thinking about the actual DLC coming to consoles. The Ps4 version of this update is just awaiting certification. It might go through today, but looking likely it's going to be tomorrow now. So at some point this week, PlayStation will be caught up just like Xbox. Now Xbox have probably had the rougher deal over them last 8 months. They had a significant issue and breakdown where a lot of people were getting booted out from the game because of memory issues. And try as they might, Funcom just couldn't fix it, or that's what they were saying. They introduced other engineers, they got another port team involved, Curve Digital I do believe, and I'm hoping it has been now finally fixed and that people won't have the problems they've had for so long. But the main bulk going over this is that temperature system has been overhauled. You'll get information exactly about what type of buffs and debuffs armors will actually give you. Combat has changed significantly with the stamina changes, and particularly around shields. They've also changed how healing items work, and hopefully making it not an episode of Benny Hill anytime you want to get in PvP with someone. Now you will have a bit more limited stamina, but to make up for it, there's all different ways that you'll be utilising it. Effectively, blocking now costs stamina, and it will consume a lot of stamina, and you've got to make sure you've pretty much got that mastered. They've got changes to the actives followers, so you can change how far they will actually follow you from, and they've changed a lot of the PvP settings for servers. They've adjusted how you damage buildings on certain servers, and so hopefully it'll open up a new game where people can actually get raided more consistently. Crafting is probably one of the biggest ones though. They've added a whole bunch of different crafting stations to kind of maximise, which has already been, I would say, something much loved in Conan. I've always liked the fact it went a bit more deeper than other games where it was not just one bench does everything. You actually have to go and invest in these sort of workbenches, different styles, and then get the different thralls that operate them. But of course now it's not so reliant on the thralls, it's definitely about the quality of that workbench. It was really hard to get tier 4 thralls, the maximum thrall sometimes, and so now the idea is that you'll be able to craft and make more high-end gear without having to waste or spend your life going through R&D. R&D? RNG. Now there was criticism I've seen over these months, which I've been keeping an eye on even if I've not been very vocal about it, talking about how it might be too many crafting benches now. But at least there is definitely choice, at least it adds more to the people that really enjoy that aspect. Specialised crafting stations will now give you different types of upgrades depending on their power, and you'll get different bonuses from them, rather than just being pretty generic previously. They've got rid of exceptional and flawless, and now the thralls are what are going to control your stats and multipliers that you get on items that are crafted. You still will have absolutely a need to go and get tier 4 thralls. They will improve certain specialisation stats when you're crafting with them, but not so reliant on that anymore. They've changed the fishing system as well, added a bunch more recipes, and one of the most requested features is the ability to customise your character. You'll now be able to go ahead and redo your makeup, your skin, all sorts of things. It's a pretty chunky post, and as I said, I think there's better YouTubers out there at the moment that can explain this stuff to you. Don't get me wrong, if I decide to get back into Conan properly, then I'll hopefully be able to deliver you just as good quality content, but for now, absolutely go and check out Whack and Kaya. Now the update is chunky, it's like 96 GB or something like that on Xbox. I'm expecting it to be a lot smaller on the PlayStation. There are a few other aspects that I want to talk about though, and it says here with the end of that sort of intro that now they've got this out of the way, they're hoping to get Isle of SIPTAH out of early access period and then make it available for all platforms. And I think this marks a change from what originally they may have planned. From what I could gain from seeing some of the community posts by the community managers, the idea would be that they would release SIPTAH and it might not be a finished product on Xbox and PlayStation, and then simply iterate it and update it. Now it does look like they're going to do that anyway, just like they did with the base game of Conan. They'll update, add free content to it, as long as you've obviously bought the DLC, so you will gain aspects out of it. But I didn't like the idea of this. I felt like the whole SIPTAH map and DLC was very rushed. They didn't devote enough time or development resources to it as they ramp up content for June. But in 8 months, they have obviously done a lot of changes. They've fixed a lot of the problems with SIPTAH, which was basically, it was just a boring grind. The map was uninspired. There was some neat mechanics and the dungeons were pretty cool, but lots of dungeons were pretty repetitive, and the world outside was too constricting where you couldn't build in certain places because of the storm that would come down to the centre and the various different ways that you had to get thralls. The latest patches and updates to the SIPTAH DLC have added new areas, new biomes, and of course a brand new god. Now from what I can understand, reading the posts and asking comms managers about it, that new god will be free and accessible on the exiled lands. And that has only just gone live today though for everyone on PC after being in test servers for a while. And the last exciting thing about that is server transfers at last for players. This is something I've been talking about for years, that Conan should have allowed players to move between servers. Servers become dead zones. Players would build up so much that you'd have no chance of going up against them as they've been on it for so long or as a bigger crew. Players were getting bored just running around taking on noobs and people that really weren't built up enough to take them and give them a challenge, and so now hopefully this will resolve a lot of that. There won't be as many dead official servers on Xbox and PlayStation as well in the future when this update does arrive. So yeah, this 2.4 update isn't here yet for Xbox and PlayStation, so you don't have server transfers yet or the new god. Briefly back to the SIPTAH DLC. So I'm kind of glad that they didn't just go and rush it out on Xbox and PlayStation without it actually having what I would consider a final lick of paint. 1.0 release is what should always be aimed for unless you are going to do some sort of reduction for console fans. And that's the bottom line. They put it into early access, which was a bizarre situation for a game that's well established. To put DLC into early access seemed pretty odd. But when you look back at the year we've had with COVID and the situation that's gone on, it must have been pretty hard to develop some of this stuff. And although I still think it was a bit of penny pinching by them, as they still probably focused too many resources onto their new projects, I can cut them some slack in understanding that this was maybe the best alternative. Rather than wait even longer and have absolutely no content coming through Conan Exiles, release something that certain fans can pay. Of course, that didn't help Xbox and PlayStation, and that's why I still think Funcom have got a lot to do. You know, every year I do my top survival games on console, and for the last few years I've always put Conan above Ark because I felt like the Ark devs kind of ignored console. Whenever DLC came out, it was always broken on console, and updates throughout the year were really sparse. Like, you got event updates, but you didn't really get lots of new content for that game, and Conan was pumping out this content: the War Maker update, the Underwater Dungeon, the Mounts update. And although some of this stuff was just some of the remnants from their early access promises, they did go above and beyond by adding extra stuff, new items, expanding a lot, adding new dungeons, effectively keeping their community going. And that's what you need in these types of games. They're not live servers like Fortnite, but they do need some sort of extra enticement. And I like the way that Funcom did it. You got free content, and in return they did sell their DLC packs. The skins, the items, the new crafting looks and stuff. Although I still have issues with the way that some of these items can sometimes seem a little bit different enough that it's worth buying them to actually get the items because it's quicker or easier to craft certain ones. Majority of them are harmless, just reskins effectively. But for players that really love the game, the community that enjoy that stuff, it's a good payoff. You buy our skin packs, you can buy the season passes, get reduction on them, and throughout the year we'll give you this content and plus all the free content. That's a good relationship in my opinion. Can't expect companies and game makers to just give free content out for years and years after the game's already come out. But then, just coincidentally, as soon as they got rid of the mounts update, it dried up. And not just the content, but the communication, things just weren't happening. And this has all started when Tencent bought them out. Now, reportedly, Tencent don't actually go balls deep into their companies. They pretty much let them get on with it, because they're already making money by the sounds of things. Why tinker with anything? And so although they were bought out, they were pretty much still under their own control. As I said, COVID has affected a lot of stuff. It did affect a lot of teams being able to get stuff ported, and I think that's majority of the reason why they said consoles were so far behind. I had a problem with this because other companies still managed to do it. You've got games like No Man's Sky pumping out content and updates throughout that whole period. There were lots of companies that found a way to do it. It wasn't impossible, but Funcom obviously didn't want to spend that much money on it because they were focusing on ramping up stuff for June. Now, you might have heard me say this already, but June is their next big open world survival game, and it's going to be hitting in 2022-2023, mark my words. We'll probably see a reveal for it at some point this year or some sort of release. Now, it's obviously based on the book series. It's going to have lots of survival mechanics in it. You're going to be on a planet filled with giant worms. There's a space age style to it, but it's still very much focused on sort of melee combat. Who knows what it will end up being. With the money investment they've got from Tencent, it could be amazing. And so obviously they've been diverting a lot of resources to that. Hence why this map, this DLC, started off as a mod, or I do believe by a very, very small crew, and it got expanded upon and expanded upon, but maybe not enough with personnel. And that's why they spent like a year just not really doing much until that September. And then yeah, big disappointment that it wasn't ready for Xbox and PlayStation at the same time. Now, again, with all that going on with COVID, it probably was the smartest move to go into early access, iterate on stuff, and then deliver. But it did feel just so off because it was unusual. Like, you've got a full game, then you're releasing DLC in early access? Come on now. DLC is normally reserved for player feedback, yes, but it does usually mean that the game is nowhere near done. And obviously SIPTAH wasn't. It's had massive changes. They've listened to the fan feedback that said it needed thralls to be gotten easier, and it needed the map to feel more alive with encampments. Pretty much a bit of a carbon copy of Conan Exiles lands, but just in a new setting with some new mobs or reskins. I personally like the idea of the surges and the purges, or whatever it was, to cool down the storms. I never really got too deep into it because I just realised that it wasn't coming out on console and I just didn't really want to sink that much time into it. But yeah, there are some interesting mechanics with it. Whether or not it's going to be worth the $30 or $40 they're going to charge for it, I'm not sure. You'll be definitely getting my review on that when it does hit Xbox and PlayStation. And so yeah, they have still got a lot to prove to me. I want to see them more regularly talking, not just when they've got DLC coming out. Talk through the bad times and the slow times, not just only crow when you've got an update or you're appeasing one set of fans. That's the mark of a good community, is when you can talk to your fans, deliver content to them, even if it is just live streams or Q&As or some way to look at the ongoings of that company. And although I'm not a big fan, I understand you guys did love a lot of the skin packs, and it baffled me why they released that one-off skin pack last year. I still believe that skin pack was meant to go with the launch of SIPTAH, not just be a one-off, or they had plans to do a whole brand new season pack, but obviously the COVID situation caused it to go under. Lots of theories, I don't know, I don't have a direct line. I can only base on what other companies do and how other companies respond, how Funcom have responded in the past. And yeah, they definitely slipped in 2020, and I don't think it was all COVID's fault. I want to get back to supporting them. I want to be hyping them up and cheerleading them on as being the better survival game, or one of the better ones on Xbox and PlayStation. But there are limitations. The consoles are really scratching that. They're creaking. The way that game makers are making their games, Xbox and PlayStation, the base versions, are being so far left behind. They're looking atrocious. And survival games seem to be even worse because of the nature of the open world, how much RAM you need. They just can't fit onto these consoles. And the more content they're pushing, the more they're making these games look great on PC. It's time that we just start thinking about no. Either make content that can actually fit specifically for them consoles, or just focus your attention. I guess that's what Funcom are doing with their June content, or their game that's going to come out in the future. It seems mad though when so little people actually own a next gen console. There is money to be had for sure in the old gen, but they're never going to just make something for old gen. It's always got to be looking great, utilising new technology, and it just means that old consoles are going to struggle. So I am interested to hear how this game runs out on an Xbox or PlayStation. Now it's had some updates behind it. Let me know in the comment section. Let me know if you want to see me cover Conan Exiles again. And you know, it did smashingly for me. Like when it came as the PS Plus free-to-play game, it was one of the best months I ever had, and it stayed that way until Grounded came out last year. And so yeah, I really appreciate the views that I got over my guides and tutorials and the way I plan stuff. But yeah, they need a lot to prove, and I'm hoping the DLC is going to be a good price for console. It's not going to be inflated, and I'm hoping that the DLC is worth that wait, and hopefully we won't spend 8 months waiting for content for Xbox and PlayStation in the future. That's my opinion. Like it, disagree, whatever. I'll see you ratbags for another video soon.